The New York Times has run a story and claims many Jewish voters back Mamdani. He is the Democrat nominee to be mayor of New York and probably going to win. Hank Berrien at the Daily Wire has a piece here in an obvious attempt to portray their leftist darling. New York Democratic mayoral candidate Zoran Mamdani is palatable to New York's Jewish population, despite Mamdani's openly anti-Israel views. The New York Times ran a puff piece in which of the 5 people they quoted openly supporting him, 2 were part of his campaign, 2 more were friendly with anti-Israel groups such as Jewish Voice for Peace or Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, and the 5th favored another candidate, Brad Lander, over Mamdani. In the piece titled, "Many Jewish Voters Back Mamdani and Many Agree with Him on Gaza," the Times admitted it's difficult to determine how many Jewish voters support Mr. Mamdani and acknowledged neighborhoods with large numbers of Orthodox Jewish residents voted overwhelmingly for Mr. Cuomo. He also won other heavily Jewish areas like Riverdale and the Bronx. Still, the Times deflected that Mr. Mamdani enjoyed a broad victory and suggested at least some backing from different constituencies. And they went out to find Jewish voters who back Mamdani, and they found exactly 5, one of whom actually favored another candidate, 2 of whom are sympathetic to anti-Israel groups, and 2 of whom are on the payroll of Mamdani himself. You know, there are people who are ethnically Jewish who couldn't care less about Israel, in the same way there are people who are ethnically Irish who don't particularly care for the Irish government. There are people who are ethnically, I mean, you name it, and they don't identify it with their ancestral homeland. I am ethnically Swedish. I've been to Sweden. I'm an American. In a fight between the United States and Sweden, it is Team USA all the way. Not that Sweden would want to fight us. They gave up their raping and pillaging days 1,000 years ago. Nonetheless, what the New York Times is doing here is they're trying to seed a false narrative to make people comfortable with Mamdani. Well, if the Jews are comfortable with him, surely you can be too. Pay no attention to his radical views. It's what the Associated Press is now doing at a global scale with Hezbollah. This is the actual story at the Associated Press. It notes this story contains images of children and adults who suffered, but their story and the tweet related to it is about the victims of the Israeli bomb attack through the pagers. Her head heavy with a cold, Sarah Joffel woke up late and shuffled into the kitchen. The silence of the apartment was pierced by the unfamiliar buzzing of a pager laying near the table. Annoyed but curious, the 15-year-old picked up the pager, belonging to a family member. She saw a message, error, then press OK. She didn't have time to respond. She didn't even hear the explosion. Suddenly, everything went dark. I felt I was in a whirlpool. She was in excruciating pain. The pager had exploded. Let's do a parallel story here. You live with someone who makes pipe bombs. You know they make pipe bombs. You know they are killing people. And one day the pipe bomb goes off. Can you imagine the Associated Press doing a pity party story on, oh, poor Rachel, whose father was a terrorist, and she knew he was a terrorist and killing people, and she did nothing to tell the authorities he was a terrorist until one day the pipe bomb accidentally went off in the house and killed her or hurt her or maimed her. Can you imagine the story that, yeah, you're covering for the terrorists? And yet this is the AP. That this girl whose family member, whose relative is a terrorist for Hezbollah, and she happened to hit the page. What's remarkable here is in the massive scale of the operation, hundreds and hundreds of Hezbollah operatives killed. They found 5 civilians. Isn't it funny? They found 5 people from Mamdani, and one of them was actually not from Mamdani. And the Associated Press found 5 people. I guess 5 is the magic number in the press. It's like the what was the story yesterday? The pull-ups, and maybe this is a pattern. I'm just realizing the pull-up story for the presidential fitness test at the New York Times. They found 5 people, 4 of whom were opposed, all 4 women, and the one guy was like, "Yeah, it was fine." They found 5 people though. Here they've got 5 people. The New York Times, you got 5 people for Mamdani, except 4 of them are actually for him. It's just kind of wild. I want you to understand what's going on here, though. The national press in the United States and the global press, they have bought in to a Hamas-backed narrative. And I want you to keep in mind as well, what you may have forgotten or did not know, is that for a very long time, a very, very, very long time, the Associated Press shared a building, knowingly shared a building with Hamas. The Associated Press never told anyone. In fact, we know from former Associated Press reporters that the Associated Press had to be careful how it shaped its stories out of Gaza relating to Hamas and relating to what was happening in Gaza for fear for their lives because they worked in the viper's nest. It didn't come out in the reporting at the time. The reporting was always decidedly anti-Israel, always decidedly pro-Hamas, always very, very much more sympathetic to what was happening in Gaza than actually was. We exaggerated the things that Israel did. Remember the story of the hospital being bombed by Israel, and it turns out Israel released the video of the Hamas guys launching a rocket from the parking lot, and the rocket didn't take off. It exploded in the parking lot. It killed the people from Hamas. It shattered the windows of the hospital. And what was the Associated Press story at the time and the other press? It was that Israel had possibly accidentally, but definitely hit a hospital with a rocket. And then the video came out. Nope, that was Hamas launching rockets from the parking lot of the hospital. And they all corrected their stories, but the damage was already done. The Associated Press, the New York Times, the Washington Post might just be the worst. They're Hamasniks. They are operatives for Hamas, essentially. They're running PR for Hamas. And now you've got the Associated Press going the next level and also running sympathetic stories of people wounded by the Israeli pagers. How about an expose on how Israel was able to pull off the awesomeness that was that pager attack? I mean, think about it. Israel had been working for a very long time through a Hungarian outlet making pagers in Taiwan, shipping them to Hezbollah. They infiltrated their supply chain. They were able to put explosives in the pagers. They seeded them throughout Hezbollah over a number of years. They made sure Hezbollah understood that Israel had infiltrated their communications grid so that Hezbollah had to use the pagers. They couldn't use the cell phones. They all got the pagers. And then they blew up the pagers. And they killed a great many people who worked for Hezbollah. I think I said Hamas. Hezbollah. It was an incredibly effective operation. One day, a book needs to be written about how successful the Israeli intelligence agency, Mossad, has actually been. It's been amazing to see the resourcefulness of the Israelis. Really has been. And I'm not surprised by the people at Hezbollah or the people at the Associated Press writing these sympathetic portrayals. What I am disappointed by are a number of people who've embraced the sympathetic stories about genocide in Gaza, the starving of the people of Gaza. You know who's starving in Gaza are the Israeli hostages that Hamas refuses to release. Saw a picture today of a starving man in Gaza, completely emaciated, like the skin is pulled so tightly around his ribs, it's concave in his ribs. You can see the individual ribs. Someone showed that picture and said, but wait, look at the same picture from this angle that showed up in the news wires that no one released. There's the starving man, and next to him is a very, very, very obese woman. You know, in Gaza, the same poor girl keeps getting killed over and over and over. They keep showing her body. You see this all the time. These people in Gaza who have died repeatedly. The Israelis continue to bomb the same hospital over and over that's never been bombed before. It's just, and the media falls for it every time. It is a major PR operation by Hamas. By the way, bad things are happening, and I don't want to undermine that bad things are happening, but war is hell, people. War is hell. And the Israelis have gone out of their way to get civilians out of the line of fire, only to have Hamas shoot at the people trying to get out of the line of fire. It's not Israel doing that. And yet Hamas continues to get a pass. The worse Hamas treats people, the worse Israel's blamed. You see the New York Times going overboard trying to rehabilitate Mamdani. Oh, he's got Jews who support him. He can't be a bad guy. The Jews support him. You see the Associated Press going out of their way to do poor pity party on people wounded by the Israeli pager operation. They're willing to rehabilitate the terrorists. They're willing to condemn Israel. Notice how none of them want to do profiles of the hostages still remaining. The New York Times put up that picture I told you about the other day of the child who had serious physical defect, birth defects, that was dying in Gaza. We now know that reporters of the New York Times told them, don't use this picture. It's not true to say this is a victim of starvation, and they used it anyway. Multiple reporters have now leaked their internal emails showing they said don't use the email of the New York Times or use the picture. The New York Times used the picture anyway. They're not willing to show the pictures of the Israeli hostages. Hamas released videos the other day of several of the hostages in tunnels, emaciated, starving to death, waiting to die, hoping to die at this point. The New York Times chose to put up a fraudulent picture, hasn't displayed the pictures of the Israeli hostages, hasn't talked about the Israeli hostages starving, hasn't done any of that. No, instead what they've done is they're taking selectively curated pictures by a PR propaganda machine of Hamas in whose building they all report out of. And they've spread the story to cause harm and violence to Jews in America and Israelis abroad, making people think the Israelis are starving the people of Gaza when it's simply not true. And you know what's happening in this country, too, is a bunch of isolationists, the very same people who said that we would start World War III if we bombed Iran. We bombed Iran. World War III did not start. Now they're like, oh, we got to get out of Israel. We got. You know what's going to happen? If you actually buy into what's happening, if you buy into the starvation claims, the U.S. is going to have to be more engaged. We're going to have to help. There's going to be a humanitarian crisis. And yet the isolationists are like, look at what the Israelis are doing. We should wash our hands of this and come home. We won't, because we're a good and moral people. If there actually was a genocide, if there actually was starvation, the United States would get involved to save lives. But the lives that actually need to be saved are of the Israeli hostages, and the American press corps could not care less about them as they restructure fawning PR campaigns about the victims of those mean old Jews. They're okay with Israeli hostages starving. They're just not okay with a PR-driven campaign by Hamas that seeks to lie to the American people that the press is a part of.